Hi, this is Greg Thomas, and welcome to the Welsh American channel. Today, I am delighted and honored once again to have Robert Humphries as our guest. Robert is a historian, a researcher, and the director of the Great Plains Heritage Center in Wymore, Nebraska. We've interviewed Robert before and have him in two videos. The Great Plains Welsh Heritage Center is one video, and the other one is Early Welsh Settlers in the American Great Plains. And I'll put links in the comments section below where you can check out those videos. Today, Robert's going to share with us the rich history of Welsh American newspapers and periodical publications. Many of the earliest were published in Welsh and some were bilingual. Let's learn about the importance of these publications in the past. And of course, today, as one of the earliest publications, will celebrate its 175th. That's amazing to me. I'll say that again, 175th anniversary in 2026. Robert, welcome to the Welsh American channel.
Well, diolch yn fawr, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you with us. I know I asked you in one of our other videos this question, but folks may have not have caught that video. Can you give us a brief autobiography of yourself? It's obvious by your accent that you weren't born and raised in Wisconsin.
Yes, so I live in Wisconsin. My name is Robert Humphries. I come from Newport in Wales originally, the Newport in Gwent, not the Newport in Pembrokeshire. And I've lived in the country since 1988. I studied history, and then I went on to do a master's degree in Celtic Studies through the University of Wales. And the focus of my research has been on Welsh immigrants in the United States in particular. And so taking that into account, I became involved with the Great Plains Welsh Heritage Center in Wymore as a researcher and translator and a board member. I helped produce and write a mini documentary, which is called Pobl y Paith, People of the Prairie, the Welsh in Nebraska, back in 2017. And in 2023, when we had the North American Festival of Wales in Lincoln, Nebraska, at that time I was given the role of director. It's a part-time role. I live in Wisconsin and do a lot of the work from Wisconsin, but I do travel down quite regularly to the Welsh Heritage Center in Wymore to work on exhibits, work in the archives, and attend meetings with the volunteers and the board there. So, and we really have a fantastic group of people that is growing in terms of both the board itself and supporters from far and wide, not just locally there in Wymore, where there was a Welsh community, but also from Welsh Americans, Welsh Canadians, people across North America who are participating, supporting, and helping us to grow and pursue our mission.
Oh, that's wonderful. So originally it was education that brought you to the United States to attend college, or?
Well, no, actually, I migrated with my family, with my parents.
Okay.
I was just finishing up my secondary education and then went on into college right after that. So I attended college at Miami University in Ohio, and then wanting to get back into education, restart my education a little bit later. That was when I pursued the master's degree in Celtic Studies through the University of Wales. At that point, it was Lampeter, now it's Trinity St. David. And so I finished that about a decade ago. I finished my master's dissertation, and that was a history of Welsh immigrants and settlers in southwestern Wisconsin. That is something I would love to turn into a book at some time. So stay tuned, because I have all this research and I want to get it out there in a something that's a little easier to read than a master's dissertation.
Right. Yeah, that would be a great publication. Certainly encourage you to do that. So let's dig a little bit into history. Robert, what was the importance of Welsh language newspapers in North America that seemed to have begun with various publications in the 1830s?
Yes, and I think and I think it's important also to expand the scope here, not just
Hmm.
newspapers as we understand them, but also periodical magazines
Right, right.
and other publications. But back in the mid 19th century, most people coming from Wales were Welsh speakers. Many of them only spoke Welsh, only understood Welsh. The Welsh were very literate people, and that was because there had been a sustained effort, particularly starting in the 18th century,
Hmm.
to with Sunday schools, with there was actually an education movement within Wales to teach people to read so that they could read the Bible and read their hymn books. And because of that, the Welsh were a very, very literate population. Even people, with more of a working class background, were educated enough to read and
Hmm.
literate, and so they were also literate in Welsh and not English. And many people had very little English at all, if any. So they were monoglot Welsh speakers, many of them, or maybe just had enough English just to get by when they got off the ship in New York City. And so, you know, Welsh publications in Welsh were extremely important for them to understand, um, to the context which they new country,
Hmm.
what the environment was like, the challenges that they would face. It enabled Welsh people living in America to communicate with each other and to help each other, acclimatize to their new country. It was obviously also very important in helping to establish institutions, helping to establish the networks of religious institutions like chapels, churches, Gymanfoedd, where they which and Gymanfa in this sense is the synod is essentially of a denomination. So it was such an important part of life for Welsh immigrants, because they needed to be able to they needed to learn quickly about where they were, about their new country that they were living in,
Hmm.
and they needed to communicate with each other effectively.
Great. Very interesting. I know that I visited a number of cemeteries in what's close to Jackson, Ohio, and the headstones are all in Welsh. So obviously, they were communities in which individuals were speaking to each other at home in Welsh and conducting business in Welsh. So that was very, very important. And most of them hoped that they would carry on the Welsh language for generations after generations. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, I guess, America has a way of making people Americans. I'll give you a classic example. My wife's father was Polish. Now, his parents both came from Poland. And in the 1930s, in Cleveland, he was born in Cleveland. In Cleveland, he actually attended an elementary school and was taught in Polish in elementary school. Now, you go one generation further, which is my wife, I don't think she can say two words in Polish, simply because they became Americanized within a couple of generations. He married a woman that is her dad married a woman who was not Polish. So it was difficult to speak Polish at home when your mate doesn't understand your language. And within just a few generations, they went from the Polish language and Polish culture to becoming very Americanized. And that's a story that's repeated over and over again, no matter what your ethnicity, including the Welsh immigrants who came to the United States. According to the National Library of Wales, a total of 21 newspapers and periodicals served the Welsh in America at various times between 1832 and the 1920s. I know many of them were short lived, but what were some of the most significant publications that, as a historian, you've discovered or you've run into that existed at that time?
Well, the first one that we know of was Cymro America, or the American Welshman,
Hmm.
which was in was established briefly in the 1830s and did not last very long. That was established in New York, and I don't believe there are any copies around extant. If somebody out there wants to correct me or has one, would love to hear about it.
Sure.
But during the 1830s is when you start to see Welsh language periodicals being published for the first time in North America. At this point, most Welsh people who were living in America that were living in New York State, they were living in Pennsylvania, and also starting to branch out into Ohio. Paddy's Run had been established out in Western Ohio in 1795, for example.
Right.
So there were Welsh communities up in sort of the northeast central part of the United States, and so that's where you see those first publications developing. Particularly, of course, in New York, you have you have the Cymro Americanaidd, which was established in the late 1830s by Robert Everett in Remsen, New York, and that was a specifically tailored to the congregational denomination. You have a Cyfaith or Henwlad in America, which was founded by Calvinistic Methodists and was initially more of sort of just a general Welsh American magazine. Over time, towards the end of the 19th century, it became much more focused on the Calvinistic Methodist Church. So it changes from being not necessarily secular, but certainly having a more secular focus to being much more of a religious periodical. So those are some of the ones that come out in the 1830s. Then you start to see more publications emerging. You have a Cymro Americanaidd in the 1850s. You have a Wasg out of Pittsburgh, which comes along a bit later in the 1870s. Colomen Columbia was published in Emporia, Kansas. From 1883 to 1893, and Colomen Columbia, which means the Dove of Columbia, you have this very significant Welsh community in Kansas that's established in the 1870s, and they are they become influential enough that they feel that they can produce a newspaper and sell it to Welsh people in that region, and it eventually would become part of. In fact, a lot of these newspapers would become part of a Drych later on, a Drych the Mirror, which we'll talk about in more detail. There was actually early on in the 1850s, there was another one called a Gwyliedydd, which means the observer, and that was quickly absorbed by a Drych in its early years. So you have a lot of these publications, again, many of them starting in the 1830s, particularly sort of the more religious ones, and then you get and I think a lot you get newspapers that are more successful mid 19th century, and I think that has a lot to do with the growth of the population, the increase in Welsh immigration between 1840 and 1860, and I think improved communications. It becomes a lot easier to send a newspaper to someone on a train in the 1860s than it was to try and distribute a newspaper across a wide area in the 1830s. So just as the United States became much more industrialized and was also expanding in its territory and attracting more immigrants, including immigrants from Wales, that's where you see the growth of the publishing industry.
Very interesting. A lot of Americans don't realize that the New York Times was founded in 1851 by a couple of gentlemen, Henry Jarvis Raymond and George Jones. And Jones himself, though he was born in Vermont, was the youngest son of John Jones, who was a manufacturer of broadcloth in Montgomeryshire, Wales. So the Welsh had an influence in American publications as well as Welsh publications. And I think oftentimes that's overlooked in our history. So what can you tell us? You mentioned about Drych. What can you tell us about its history? And I think translated in English, it means the mirror. Is it the oldest Welsh American newspaper in the United States today? An article on the internet, and of course we know the internet never lies, but anyway, an article on the internet said, quote, the publication has a continuous run since 1841. End of quote. What can you share with us about its history?
Well, I'm not sure where they got the 1841 date
Okay.
from, but because we know that it was actually begun in New York City in 1851,
Okay, 10 years later.
and it it began really, when you look at the first page of
Mhm.
Drych, of its very first issue, what you see at the top is actually some sheet music for to a hymn. You
Mhm.
have poetry. You have just columns and columns of poetry,
Oh, nice.
and inside the information that you get is very tailored to people who have just arrived in New York City. They might be looking for a place to stay. They're looking for information about where to go and what they, just the essentials of what they need to get established. And you also see information. You might see little bits of news about things that are going on elsewhere
Mhm.
in the world, and in the United States and Britain in particular. And you see so many interesting changes when you look at the history of Adri. So it starts off as being very much focused on the immigrant community in New York,
Mhm.
in New York City, really. And then as it makes connections with other Welsh communities, you start to see uh, articles about things that are going on in up in Utica, New York, and Remsen, and out in parts the settlements in Pennsylvania. And that's how it is during its early years in the 1850s.
Mhm.
In 1861, it moved to Utica, and it was purchased by a publisher in Utica, a prominent Welsh publisher, the and and at that time it changes it becomes a lot more it becomes a lot more expansive in its vision.
Okay.
um it's connecting with a lot more Welsh people, larger number of Welsh communities, and you start to see a lot of it's very, very focused on news from the United States, obviously. It's at this time, of course, that the Civil War has started. Unfortunately, we don't have many uh, extant copies of Adri from the Civil War years themselves. There are some, but it's what we have is intermittent. But we know at that time that it took a very patriotic, very pro-union stance. Obviously, it was right there in New York State. Most of the Welsh were aligned in the United States, were aligned with the Union and living in northern states. Many of them were very anti-slavery,
Mhm.
and it really began to take on a very it took on a political stance, during this time, and it became, commercially much more successful once it moved to Utica.
Mm.
And then what you see then in the 1870s through the end of the 19th century is a very, very vibrant newspaper. It dealt with all kinds of topics. It was there was a lot of editorial content, and there were lots of letters from readers about things that were going on in the United States. There was a lot of discussion of things that were going on in Wales as well, and there was news. There was obviously American news, but there was syndicated news. Essentially, they would be reprinting reports
Mhm.
from newspapers elsewhere in the United States, translating them into Welsh. Um, And it really was, the historian, the historians Ala Jones and Bill Jones, who wrote the book Welsh Reflections, a history, which is a history of Drych, call this period Drich's imperial phase, when it had its widest readership,
Hmm.
and it was its at its most successful. And I think another aspect of that is the if you look at Drych during that time, you see the amount of correspondence between people across North America that pour into its pages, from obviously from the east, but also from places far out across the west, California, Oregon. You have you can use a Drych to actually trace where people were living, where Welsh-speaking people were living at that time.
Interesting. Yeah.
I recently researched a, uh, a Welsh slate mining community that was located in Quebec, that existed for about 30 years, and then once the slate business declined, those people moved on.
Hmm.
But without a Drych, I don't know that I would have known about it.
Right.
Um, there were Welsh. You get letters about things that are going on in a Welsh community, for example, in Montana, where they were working in a coal mine, or Wyoming. We have this, material coming in. It really was, I think, one of the major ways that Welsh people were able to connect with each other
Hmm.
in the late 19th century. And of course, and we can talk also about how things, how that continued, and how that changed in the in the 20th century as well.
Right. So let's fast forward a little bit. November of 2003, Drych is purchased by Ninai Publications and merged with the bi-monthly publication, Ninai, the North American Welsh News. For those who aren't familiar with it, and hopefully they'll give me permission to put a copy of the front page on here and its masthead. Ninai is a North American Welsh newspaper that was founded in 1975. It's published bi-monthly. I'm a subscriber. I'm sure Robert is not only a subscriber, but he also serves as a historian officially for the publication. And it continues to provide news and articles, cultural support for the Welsh American community. So how is a merged newspaper doing with a small base of people that might be interested in those kinds of topics in a nation of nearly 300 million people? How's it doing as it comes close to celebrating 50 years of Ninai and 175 years as Drych next year?
Well, you probably should also talk to the editor of Megan Williams, but
Sure.
I think, as somebody who's quite close to
Hmm.
it as a contributor and a reader, I think that it is very successful at communicating within the Welsh American
Hmm.
community. When I say I should say the Welsh North American community. This spans both the United States and Canada. I think that there is a lot of really good information about what's going on with Welsh events,
Hmm.
what's coming up with the North American Festival of Wales, but also a lot of the smaller events that are taking place throughout North America. So
Hmm.
Gyman Voidd um, Welsh Society gatherings, talks, lectures, things. We of course there are a lot of online events now. You will find information about those things. In addition, you have material that's contributed about genealogy. There's a genealogy a column by my friend Jan Jones Batty that is very helpful and
Hmm.
informative. There are numerous articles about Welsh North American history, which readers have contributed. There are book reviews, CD reviews of Welsh music. And there's also a column. There are columns which talk about what's going on in Wales.
Hmm.
News from Wales, which it's and of course, I mean, people have many different sources of news these days. So unlike in the early years where of Drych, where it was focused on, it provided a lot of news in the Welsh language, contemporary
Right.
events, political news, all of those things in the Welsh language. Today, it is, obviously it's mostly almost entirely an English language publication with some with some contributions in Welsh, and a monthly Welsh column. Um, but now it is much more focused on you know Welsh ethnic community
Hmm.
events, activities, language learning, all of those sort of different things that I think are for a lot of people are fun. It's
Sure.
probably a lot
Absolutely.
more fun of a newspaper than it was when it was started, which it was more of, it was more practical. And today it really is about bringing people together, I think, which bringing people together to do things to revive, to commemorate, to celebrate Welsh culture in North America. So I think it's always fun to get in the mail. I also get it in a digital form,
Yes.
but being old-fashioned, I still like to have the paper, and I think I think the focus of Welsh American life, now
Hmm.
it's a lot more about getting together, having a good time, celebrating our culture, and that really is the focus of Ninai under Drych today.
Yes. I get the PDF version, and I absolutely love it. If anyone is interested in Welsh American history and learning little tidbits about individuals who maybe don't get a lot of attention, the attention they deserve and should for their contributions in North America, you can't beat uh, the magazine and the articles and the information that it provides. So, Robert, presently, the Archive for Welsh America that's located in the Great Plains Welsh Heritage Center, of which you are involved, I know it provides scholars and genealogists with vital resources for understanding the history of the Welsh experience in North America. Does this include a collection of some of the Welsh American newspapers we've talked about? Can you tell us a little bit about how those what those newspapers are and maybe how someone can do research connected with the Archive for Welsh America?
Yes, so at the Archive for Welsh America, which is part of the Great Plains Welsh Heritage Centre, and I should say this is a purpose-built archive. We raised the funds about a decade ago, and it was built in 2013, and since then has been amassing materials from donations from across North America. Uh, we have a collection of microfilms that was specially made for us from the collections that are in Aberystwyth at the National Library of Wales. This is a collection of microfilms of a Drych from 1851 to 1950. So
Mhm.
almost the first century of its existence. And so in addition to that, we have um, we have we do have some hard copies from the earlier years in the 19th century, a few, uh, and then we have paper copies of a Drych uh, from 1950 onwards
Mm.
until its final independent issue.
Mhm.
We also have Ninai all the way from the beginning in print.
Oh, great.
In addition to that, we do have copies, some original bound copies of the Welsh American denominational publications like a
Mhm.
Cyfaill or Henwlad and a Cenhadwr
Mhm.
Americanaidd. So we do have we have a pretty extensive collection. I believe we have the most extensive collection of a Drych that you can find anywhere in North America.
Okay.
And so, there are a lot of these things have been digitized by the National Library of Wales. Some issues of a Cyfaill and a Cenhadwr can be found online on Google as well. Um, but particularly in terms of a Drych, not everything is digitized and has been digitized by the National Library of Wales. So uh, the National Library of Wales website doesn't have anything before 1875, and they don't have anything between around 1900 and 1910, and then they don't have anything after 1919. That was sort of their copyright cutoff.
Gotcha.
So where we can help is, I mean, we can look through our microfilms and our hard copies, pretty much in it through any time, any at any point through that 150 or so years, and we can certainly look for things. It helps, if you come to us with a research question, you're looking for any articles about such and such a person or such and such a place, the more details we have, the easier it is to find things. And but we've been approached by people looking for information about their ancestors,
Right.
and we can look for things. I read Welsh and can offer some translation as well, which for people for people in the United States who don't speak Welsh, that's obviously something that's really beneficial.
Sure, you bet.
And of course, it is hard to find people sometimes who will be able to translate Welsh. We do have we do ask for a fee donation, and you can find for research and for translation, and you can find that on all of those details on our website, which is greatplainswelsh.org. So if you go there and look up research on our website, you will find, and the archives on our website, you will find information about what we offer and what we can do to help.
That's really great. And for people for people who are interested in a deep dive in research, if I recall correctly, you folks for a very reasonable hourly rate can do some research for someone who's looking for a particular topic, person, or idea that maybe requires a deeper level of research than most people are able to have access to or able to spend time doing.
Yes, that is something that we can do. It may take a while, and when I do that, I'm looking at what we have in Wymore. I do also look at what's available on digitally, what's been digitized out there as well. So looking at a wide range of resources that are available. As I said, it can be very difficult, and it's not always successful. And people going into this process, I think probably anybody who's doing genealogical research recognizes that sometimes there can be dead ends, or there can be things that just don't bear fruit. And so with that caveat in mind, it is definitely something that we can do. One of the problems, of course, with Welsh people is that so many people have similar names, and that can make searching very very challenging. So I would recommend anybody coming to us with a question, with a research question, really have as much information already that they give us all of the information that you have so far, so that we can we can get off to a good start.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point. In the 1980s, the first time I went to Wales, I traveled to my grandfather's town, Treorchy, and his name was Thomas. His middle name was John. So I went to the local cemetery with not enough information to look up his ancestors, and the number of Thomases were astounding in the cemetery, and John Thomases seemed to be everywhere on the headstones. So it is important to do your research in advance, and to have someone who can sift through a lot of things in order to come up with accurate genealogical information. So thanks for bringing that out. I do have another question for you that's a bit off subject, but it does relate to printed material. According to the BBC and a number of American sources, Abraham Lincoln's 1960 presidential campaign produced campaign literature in the Welsh language. Some sources say that up to 100,000 election pamphlets were printed in Welsh to appeal to Welsh-speaking voters in the United States Have you ever heard of this before? And do any of these copies exist today?
Oh yes, I am familiar with that. That was the yeah, his first election campaign in 1860,
Hmm.
and the I recall when that was when the BBC you know produced that story
Hmm.
some years ago, and it has been digitized by the Library of Congress.
Oh, so it does
So
exist.
I believe you
Wow,
can
that's
find it
so
on
cool.
the Library of Congress website, and I believe it was just a straightforward translation
Mhm.
of a political campaign pamphlet for Lincoln. It also mentions his vice presidential candidate
Okay.
Hannibal Hamlin, and it's a biography of Lincoln. And so there are copies in existence. I wish we had one at our museum and archive in
Hmm.
Wymore,
Hmm.
but we don't. Maybe somebody will find one and generously donate it to us. Um, and I think that underscores, along with the Drych, that there were other things that were printed and published in the Welsh language uh, that are wholly American in character and for example, shortly after Wisconsin became a state in 1848, the state constitution was published in a number of immigrant languages, and Welsh was one of them. So that Welsh people could understand how their government worked. Um,
Hmm.
in our archive, we have a speech uh, from given by one of the governors of Pennsylvania in the late 19th century, and it was translated into Welsh. And so we have a copy of that in our archive. I followed up in looking through a Drych to see what I could find, if anybody, what people thought of it.
Hmm.
And apparently, the editors of a Drych were not particularly impressed with the translation,
Oh.
but it's an important historical document, and it underscores how important it was for people to have access to information, to practical information, um, in their own language. And of course, this wasn't just a Welsh phenomenon. There were lots of
Hmm.
uh, German, Czech, other languages, Italian. All of these immigrant languages during this time were being, there were publications that were coming out to help them find their way in their new country.
Yeah, I think that is so cool. I really do, and I think it highlights the fact that in 1860, the Welsh were still having enough of a significant influence within their communities and within America in general that the president felt it would be a good idea to print up to 100,000 pamphlets at that time to reach Welsh speakers. That is, to me,
Yes,
just fascinating and so
yes.
interesting. So I'm curious, and this is also a little bit off topic. In the United States, printed publications are dying at a rapid rate. To give you an example, when I grew up in the city of Cleveland, Ohio, there were two daily newspapers. Today, it's down to one, and they don't even publish every day in paper. They publish some PDF versions, and just a few days a week, they'll publish a paper version for people to read. So we could say that traditional media in the United States at least, is shrinking and dying because of the impact of social media. Are Welsh language newspapers today in Wales facing the same kind of problems of a declining readership, though the Welsh language appears to be holding its own?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and of course, I can only answer more
Hmm.
from my perspective, living on this side of the Atlantic, but and following developments in
Hmm.
Cymru. But I would say, I mean, there hasn't been, um, much of a Welsh language press in terms of major newspapers, in Wales
Hmm.
for quite a while. And, you have mostly English newspapers like the Cambrian News and the Western Mail, South Wales Argus, those sort of papers. Um, And those, particularly, I think I think it's the Cambrian News in North Wales has some Welsh language content. There is I believe it's a monthly printed paper called a Cymro, which is sort of like a tabloid. But I say tabloid, but it actually has a lot of really good content, but it has that
Yes.
sort of format and look to it, which continues to thrive, as far as I can tell, at least among the Welsh language, Welsh speaking community in Wales. I know that some years ago there was a campaign to start a Welsh daily newspaper in Wales, and it was called A Byd, the World. And there was a lot of discussion in what at that time was called the Welsh Assembly government, and they ultimately decided not to provide support for it because they didn't feel that that newspapers were going to be a self-sustaining
Sure.
medium in the near future. But what I will say is, if you go to Wales, you will find in the Welsh-speaking parts of Wales, you'll find these really wonderful publications called papurau bro, or local papers. Essentially, is what that means.
Okay.
And a papur bro it's usually published monthly. It's all in Welsh, and it has a lot of just generally very from what I've seen, very uplifting and positive community news. And so I think those have more of a local reach, but a lot of them now also have a digital presence. So you can go online and sometimes download some of these. I know at various times news websites in Wales have also utilized some of that content and shared it with their readers. And then you have obviously the other online and broadcast media in Wales, which people have access to. So I would say that the media landscape in Wales, as everywhere, is changing, adapting. I think that the days of daily newspapers worldwide, outside of very large, very well established publications like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Times in the UK. The days of those are waning, but I think that what people in Wales are doing, Welsh speakers are doing, is finding ways to adapt, and I think that these new forms of media and new ways of sustaining print media in different forms will continue to thrive as long as people appreciate them.
Yes. Hopefully they will. Hopefully
Yes.
they'll more than survive. Hopefully they'll thrive.
Yes.
So I want to give you, before I conclude, I'd like to give you the opportunity to make any final comments. I know that there are some wonderful organizations that are supporting the Welsh American community that are having some fundraising drives. So perhaps you want to mention the purpose and what those organizations are, and maybe we can help get some additional donations going.
Well, I'd like to talk about two things. First of all,
Yes.
since we're talking about Ninau and Drych, there is currently, in order to celebrate 50 years of Ninau this year and 175 years of Drych in next year, in 2026, there is an effort by the paper to establish an endowment. And so, with enough donations, it could be possible to potentially even distribute Ninau and Drych maybe one day for free to people who would like to subscribe to it. Certainly, it would ensure that it has a long and healthy future ahead of it. So I would I would certainly encourage people to look into that, make a donation, or find out more about that campaign
Mhm.
um, at the NINAI website and in NINAI itself. What we're doing at the Great Plains Welsh Heritage Centre, of course, is preserving and commemorating Welsh North American history. And as I mentioned, we have our purpose-built archive. We've had many, many generous donations of personal items, including newspapers, obviously, and periodicals, but also manuscripts, all kinds of personal historical documents, textiles, clothing, artifacts, photographs, all of which is preserved in a purpose-built archival quality building.
Excellent.
And we have, it's temperature controlled, has a fire suppression system, and it's tornado proof, which is of course very important on the Great Plains.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the things, everything, what you donate will be safe there. But we have two things that we're trying to raise money for right now, which is we would like to expand our building, since
Mhm.
after we had a lot of interest after the North American Festival of Wales in Lincoln. So we're trying to we would like to build an exhibit room onto our existing structure. It would be about 3,300 square feet, and
Mhm.
we need to raise $175,000 to do that. So we certainly welcome donations to that. We also could really do with some assistance with our operating fund and our operating expenses. As you know, prices have risen across the board for many people, and for personally and for businesses and organizations, and we're no exception. So at this time, we actually have perhaps even a more immediate need of some of donations to our operating fund, so we can advertise, so we can promote, so we can work within our existing space with a view to, of course, expanding as well. So if you would like to make a donation, you
Mhm.
can. We certainly welcome checks, particularly for larger amounts, because online processing fees have risen as well. But if you would like to go to our website to learn more and make a donation, you can go to greatplainswelsh.org. You can press the donate button that's right there and make a donation. You can become a member, which is a great way to make a donation. As if you
Mhm.
become a member, you get our newsletter, which has, I make sure that we have a lot of interesting, Welsh North American historical content, translations, information about, things in our collection,
Mhm.
and artifacts, as well as news about and updates about what we're doing. Um, One of the other things we're doing is digital outreach. I'm talking to you on this podcast today, but
Right.
we've I've initiated a series of Welsh seminars, essentially, with guest speakers to talk about
Mhm.
aspects of uh, Welsh and Welsh North American history and culture. So look for more of those in the future. Please visit our website if you're interested. If you're interested, please become a member. And if you feel particularly generous, we would certainly welcome your donation.
Great. And I will have a copy in the comments section of both of those great organizations, and so that you can easily be able to make a donation uh, to one of the organizations that Robert has talked about. So, Robert, thanks a million for joining us today, and thank you so much for sharing your education, your talents, and your research to support and promote the Welsh American community. It is deeply appreciated by many of us.
Well, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much, Greg.
You bet. Thanks, everyone. This is the end of our video for today, and Hoylam Nauer. Bye for now.